Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. If you have seats at your table, please raise your hands. And those who are looking for seats, okay, we should be able to accommodate everybody. We have a big program, so we're going to get started. Thank you all for being here for City Club Missoula's first forum of 2020, and so far our largest forum of 2020. Just a little City Club humor. I'm Susan Hay Patrick. I am the incoming president of City Club, pinch hitting for Peggy Coor, our outgoing president who is on vacation. In addition to thanking all of you for being here, on behalf of City Club, I want to thank our sponsors who are listed on the table tents in front of you. And to our sponsors, both continuing and new, we're in the process of updating our marketing materials, including our table tents. So if your name and logo aren't on the tents, they will be soon. Please bear with us. City Club Missoula's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire citizens on issues vital to the Missoula community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. Some other thank yous to Blackfoot for sponsoring UM students again in 2020. And by the way, if you are interested in sponsoring folks to come to City Club Missoula, please see our coordinator, Eric Legvold, the guy who checked you in, Eric Legvold, or me, after class. We think these forums are important, but they cost money to present. And although we do whatever we can to keep the prices as low as possible, we still know that the forums are unfortunately prohibitively expensive for a number of folks interested in our topics whom we would like to include. It's a matter of equity. So sponsorship you can help make that happen, help bring more diverse voices to the table. Thanks also to UM Climate Change Studies Program students for joining us, and to Professor Peter McDonough for spreading the word to them about this forum, to Dr. Clay Looney and his systems analysis class at the university for developing our new City Club website. It's not yet fully live, so please stay tuned for the website release announcement. And to Windfall for developing our new City Club Missoula logo, which you'll start seeing on all of our materials. Some reminders to join or rejoin City Club Missoula in 2020. Take advantage of our discount opportunity, $35 for individual memberships until the March forum. There are forms on your table, or see Eric right there in the back, to join or rejoin. There are name tags on the table, so if you don't come with a name tag already affixed to you, please fill one out. If you're a frequent City Club attendee, you know that one of the hallmarks of City Club is table talk, where after the presentation, each table formulates a question for our panelists. So please introduce yourselves. I'll talk more about table talk logistics and expectations after our presentation. Members of the media, we ask you to please hold your questions until after the forum, at which time our panelists will be available to speak with you. Speaking of the media, we're so grateful to MCAT, Missoula Community Access Television, for filming every City Club forum as part of its Media Assistance Grants Program to nonprofit organizations. They're broadcast within 24 to 48 hours after today. MCAT serves the Missoula area on cable channels 189 and 90, a great community resource. Our February forum on the Riverfront Triangle development, featuring Nick Chakota from the Top Hat and Wilma, etc., and Jim McLeod from the Farron Group, will take place on February 17. That's the third Monday of the month. Unfortunately, it is also President's Day, which means that we are going to miss a number of you, but the hotel was unable to accommodate us on our usual day or later in the month, so we had to go with the 17th. It's going to be a great forum on a topic that I think is of interest to our community. And just on that note, we encourage you to make note of all of our upcoming forums, many of which will be full or close to capacity, so please register in advance. And now, unless Robert or Eric tell me I have something else to say, I'm going to introduce our panel. We are so lucky to have these people with us here today talking about climate resilience, climate change. First, Amy Scylla Berg is the Executive Director of Climate Smart Missoula. Amy loves putting her passions to work, leading Climate Smart, strengthening connections, initiating new programs, and building a resilient community. She was part of the team that launched this organization, and she's been leading it since its inception. Amy has worked on climate and energy policy for the last decade, encouraging solutions at the local, state, and federal levels. She did much of this through her work at Montana Audubon and by volunteering locally to help develop Missoula's climate action plans. Diana Minetta is the Energy Conservation and Sustainability Coordinator for Missoula County. She has held that position for the past 2 years. Previously, she worked as Executive Director of the Montana Renewable Energy Association, as Sustainability Coordinator for Lewis and Clark County, and as an advisor at the California Energy Commission. She has her master's degree in Energy and Resources from UC Berkeley. Go Bears. Chase Jones is all these people have such long titles. Energy Conservation and Climate Action Coordinator. How do you even fit that on a business card? For the City of Missoula. He works to coordinate implementation of Missoula's Municipal Conservation and Climate Action Plan, the Community Climate Smart Action Plan, and 0 by 50 Zero Waste Plan. Some of you heard Chase present on that a couple of years ago. Chase has been losing sleep over energy and climate action since 2013. Prior to this job, he spent 12 years working to maintain and improve the health of places and people through work with the Bureau of Land Management in Central California, as well as with the Montana Conservation Corps. He also managed the Department of Energy's Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant programs, that grant for both the City of Missoula and Missoula County. So please join us up here, our illustrious panel. They're going to speak for about a half hour, and then we'll break for table talk, and I will give you the official table talk instructions at that time. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
Fantastic. Hello. As Susan said, my name is Chase Jones, and I have the privilege of serving as the city's Energy Conservation and Climate Action Coordinator. It barely fits on a business card, but I like to say little guy, big title, but I'm working on that as I become more and more responsible for plans with either zeros or hundreds in the goals. So just to address that. After 18 months of hard and intentional work, I'm thrilled to welcome each of you and to introduce our draft Climate Ready Missoula Plan. Climate change is on the minds and in the hearts of nearly everyone these days. We are seeing the impacts of climate change across the globe as well as in our community and around Missoula County. It's not easy to address, but science tells us that we must try, that we must do what is necessary rather than feasible, and that necessary is rational, not radical. I share the stage with Diana Minetta from Missoula County and Amy Scylla Berg from Climate Smart Missoula. They're the brains and bronze behind this. I'm just the face that got this room packed, right? The three of us represent and demonstrate yet another example of the city, county, and a nonprofit collaborating to tackle a tough issue. This should not be taken for granted. It's not unique to Missoula, but it's something that is unique about Missoula. And the three of these organizations, along with many of the organizations and individuals in this room. However, we're not alone, the three of us, in planning for a resilient Missoula County, which is another trademark of climate action work in Missoula. To that end, I'd like to recognize our steering committee. Can I get them to stand up? Thank you. Can I get our steering committee to stand up, please? I won't read their names individually, although I would really like to, and they would deserve it, but they're listed on the screen. As you can see, their representation is as diverse as the strategies to address climate change and strategies represented in this plan. They have poured their expertise, experience, and best guidance consistently every step of the way in this process. And for that and so much more, we are more than grateful, Steering Committee. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize Caroline Lauer. Caroline, could you stand too? Instrumental is not a strong enough word to describe the value Caroline has provided as a leader on this team and to the content, preparation, and presentation of Climate Ready Missoula. Thank you so much, Caroline. Finally, I'd be remiss to not recognize the robust public process to get to this point of the plan. The notion that climate change impacts much of what Missoula values is not new. To that end, it has been a top issue for a long time, and one that leadership in Missoula, whether it be local government, nonprofits, or individuals, are all in together on. To make sure that we captured that passion, interest, and diversity in the plan, we hosted several community conversations, some of which are pictured in this slide. As a result, hundreds of stakeholders and individuals had the opportunity to make this plan what it is, make it more comprehensive, and make it better. We're proud of that effort. Don't take that for granted, that Missoulians always show up, and are proud that the plan at this point reflects the diversity of Missoula County and all of the brilliant folks that contributed to it. Okay, enough of me. Is everyone ready to dive into the content? I know I am. And I know just the person to kick that off, and that person is Diana Minetta.
Thanks so much, Chase. So what does climate change mean for Missoula County? That's the question that we started with when we started this process about a year and a half ago. We took a deep dive into locally specific climate projections that luckily are available to us through the Montana Climate Assessment that was put together by dozens of scientists at UM and MSU, and also from county-specific data that's available from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and other federal agencies. What we found is that in Missoula County, climate change is likely to mean hotter, drier summers, warmer and wetter winters and springs. As a result, more spring flooding, more summer drought, a longer wildfire season, and more wildfire smoke. It's also likely to mean more variability from year to year, such that the concept of a normal or average year, typical year, becomes a thing of the past. Chances are we'll see an increase in our population due to climate change in Missoula County on top of the population growth that's projected anyway, independent of climate change. And that's because as difficult as these impacts may appear, other parts of the country are likely to have it a lot worse, especially places that are facing sea level rise and hurricanes. Of course, any effort to predict the future is accompanied by uncertainty, and climate science is no exception. In our draft plan, we illustrate that uncertainty both by ranges in terms of the likely range of temperature increase, likely range of precipitation change. We also use a scenario approach. We present 3 mid-century climate scenarios for Missoula County that illustrate possible futures we could see in Missoula County based on these projections. One of the reasons for that uncertainty in climate projections in particular is that we don't know exactly how greenhouse gas emissions are going to change globally in the coming decades. Here's an illustration of that from our draft plan. This chart shows the projected average temperature increase in Missoula County by the end of the century under 2 different assumptions. One is business as usual. This is assuming that greenhouse gas emissions globally continue to increase over the next century as they have in recent decades. The other is called stabilization, and this is assuming that greenhouse gas emissions increase for a couple of decades, peak, and begin to come down again. And you can see the likely temperature increase we're facing changes quite significantly depending on what you assume about greenhouse gas emissions. In the business as usual case, we're looking at average summer temperatures more than 9 degrees hotter than they are right now. Another difference between these 2 assumptions is that in business as usual, that's not the end of it. At the end of the century, it'll keep on going. Those temperatures will keep on rising, whereas in the stabilization scenario, they'll level out. So the bottom line is that what we're doing here, Climate Ready Missoula, this is about adapting to and preparing for climate change, and we believe that it's essential. But we also believe that it's not enough, and that we also need to do our part in Missoula County to reduce our contribution to climate change. All of the organizations represented on the stage, as well as many others represented in the room and elsewhere, are working on climate mitigation as well. That's reducing our contribution to climate change. That's not what we're talking about here today, but these two things have to go hand in hand. I now want to talk a little bit about our Climate Ready Missoula process. We started off in the summer of 2018, as I mentioned, taking that deep dive into the climate projections and identifying the 7 impacts that I presented on an earlier slide. We released that information in our first publication, our Climate and Community Primer, in late 2018. We then had our first stakeholder workshop. We brought a group of over 100 stakeholders together to identify who and what is most at risk as a result of those climate impacts. Taking a look, and it included folks representing a lot of different sectors that are shown on the right side of the screen here, and taking a look at what those impacts mean for our health, for our agriculture sector, for all the sectors listed there. What we heard at that workshop, we compiled into our draft vulnerability assessment, which we put out for public comment last spring, got a lot of great input from the public on that. And then after that vulnerability assessment was finalized, we moved into the third and final phase of our project, which is where we're looking at goals and strategies. So we brought stakeholders back together for another workshop to identify what should we be doing? What are some strategies and solutions that we should embark on in order to address those risks that were identified, the highest priority risks that were identified in the vulnerability assessment? We have taken what we heard at that workshop and put it together into a draft Climate Ready Missoula Plan, which is what we're releasing today. That plan includes information from all 3 phases of the project. It includes the climate projections. It includes the risks and vulnerabilities. And what's new in this draft plan is 29 proposed goals and 67 proposed strategies to prepare for and adapt to climate change in Missoula County. So I want to give a brief example of what I mean when I say risks and what I mean when I say strategies. This example covers a few of those from the buildings and the human health sectors. So let's take a look here at downtown Missoula, specifically at that house and that family that lives in the house. What is climate change likely to mean for them? Well, here's a few things that it's likely to mean. It's likely to mean unhealthy indoor air during periods of wildfire smoke, because we have learned in recent years that when the air quality is bad outside, it's probably bad inside your home as well, unless you have an air filtration system that really filters out that fine particulate matter in wildfire smoke, or a portable air cleaner, which most buildings don't have. It's likely to mean increased cooling costs due to those hotter summers. It's likely to mean physical and mental health impacts of heat and smoke. And quite possibly, it'll mean damage to the trees in their yard and in their neighborhood as a result of those hotter, drier summers. And when there aren't as many trees in the urban environment, there's not as much shade, and that just exacerbates the problem of summer heat. So these are 4 risks that were identified in our vulnerability assessment, 4 of many. So what should we do as a community to address these risks? One thing we should do, and we already are doing, should do more of, is increase access to portable air cleaners, to HEPA air filters, so that everybody has the opportunity to have clean and safe air inside their homes during periods of wildfire smoke. We should take a look at the energy efficiency of our buildings and improve it, both in terms of newly constructed buildings and also in terms of retrofitting existing buildings to control those cooling costs. We should collaborate with healthcare providers to develop a wildfire smoke exposure checklist. This is something that was suggested by health professionals that were involved in our process, to say this is a way that we can identify when the issues folks are facing are a result of wildfire smoke and address those appropriately. We should make sure that as we're planting trees in the urban environment and elsewhere in the county, they're the right species that are resilient to changing conditions and that folks have the information they need about how to water and care for those trees appropriately so they'll live long and healthy lives. These are 4 examples of strategies that are identified in our draft plan, 4 of 67. So just a small picture here. I'm going to turn it over to Amy now, who's going to give a few more examples.
Great, thank you. As Diana just illustrated a human system and some of the risks and strategies, I'm going to provide an example of some within our terrestrial and our aquatic, our natural systems, because they too have risks and strategies associated. So again, this is just an example to help us understand what's in this plan. The climate change is potentially going to impact some of our iconic species, in this case, trout, resulting in declines in our area, potentially even declines or potentially even extirpating or decreasing altogether in Missoula County. However, and those risks look like this: increased water temperature, increased stress on aquatic species, increased invasives, and potential changes or reductions in habitat quality. However, there are, again, strategies that have been brought forward in this plan by some of our experts, including watershed management plans based on climate projections, not just historic, but where we're headed towards in the future, potentially creating a watershed reinvestment fund to financially support restoration after wildfire or other perturbations that may hit some of these ecosystems, watersheds, and maybe enhancing their strengthening streamside buffers and support of beavers to increase watershed resiliency to fire. People in this room may know beavers are a hot topic, right? We know that they can actually keep water into the system later into the season given drought. So I point that out because a lot of the strategies that come forward are not brand new. They're not something nobody's ever thought of. Some of the work here means strengthening, enhancing, building capacity within things that people are already doing. Some of these strategies, however, may be new. Okay, so we don't have time to go through all 67 identified strategies, and I will mention that when we first went through our second workshop, we had over 300. We've kind of tried to bring them together and reduce redundancy. There are a lot of strategies that we will be working on moving forward. But given that we have impacts to our water systems, our land, our air systems, and our human communities, here's just a potpourri of some of the other strategies that, again, have come forward and are in this plan. We may need to regulate and restrict new development in high-risk areas, both given wildfire and flooding. So that is a recommendation coming forward. There's an interest and a need to enhance the public and healthcare providers regarding the mental health impacts of wildfire smoke. Those times are challenging when we're really inundated with smoke, but also other big change that people are grappling with. That's where we're going to need our mental health providers to step in and help us. Ensure sufficient emergency response personnel within rural areas of our county. Again, strengthening those systems that we already have. Diversifying our farm income sources so that we're ready for climate variability, potentially even longer growing season, which climate change brings. There's a lot of ways we can strengthen that sector of our economy. Incorporate climate migration and population growth projections in planning efforts, as Diana mentioned, is a strategy identified. And finally, again, as an example, increase the agility of tourism and recreation businesses to adapt to change, potentially adjusting timing and location of activities so these businesses are strong, giving the future that's unfolding. So lots of strategies. We're not going through all 67 of them. And again, I wanted to kind of clarify or just help folks to understand how we have structured this, because hopefully you're all going to dive in and read this plan and help us work on it. But again, the goals and strategies are identified and organized within 8 different sectors that you can see here. And it's all on our brand new website that we launched about an hour ago. So it's been a little work. Again, Caroline Lauer's been praying, but we've got it all together. We didn't want anybody else to get a sneak peek, so you guys are the first to see it. So now this is the live website. I can't actually control it, so Caroline's going to help me a little bit. But we're going to spend just a couple minutes here showing you what's on this website to encourage you to spend some time with it. There's a lot to this plan, and depending on your interest, your professional work, there's going to be a lot for everyone here. So I'll first point out that on the very home page, you can read the full plan, all 88 pages. It's exciting, and I'm sure you want to do that, but you can also read the executive summary. We have a few copies here. It's only 11 pages, so that's a little easier. But most of the plan is on this website in various ways. And I first because it's a very intricate and interconnected website, we have a little guide about how to use it, depending on who you are and what you might want to know. So do check out the left-hand side there, and you can click. Those are little accordions. They open up. And then there's some quick links down below. So we have a little bit of a guide to the website. And then on the right-hand side, we also have guiding principles. And those are on the front page for a reason. We really would encourage all of you who are interested in this topic to review our guiding principles and really spend some time with them. They underpin all of our work. They're very important. Our steering committee worked very hard to come up with these, and we think they're incredibly valuable to keep in mind. Given climate change, how do we make sure that we have an equitable society, that we're thinking about everyone? And again, these are accordion. You can click on, draw on tradition and culture. It's very important to us that we consider traditional ecological knowledge. We're on Salish lands. In this room, we are also intersecting and working with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, who are about to update their climate action plan. They've had one for a while. They have a very robust plan. And these are opportunities for us here in Missoula, but all of Missoula County, to intersect, learn from, and develop synergies with our tribal partners just to the north. So that's a very important piece of our guiding principles. So just a couple quick things on the rest of this. We have an About Us page. You can learn more. We have the primer, which is all of the science that Diana just alluded to and mentioned briefly. There are scenarios that we've developed, different plausible futures that could come forward, and I really encourage folks to dive in and look and check out that science. Again, it's specific to Missoula County in this region. And then impacts and vulnerabilities. Again, you can drop down and you can see the various impacts. Maybe you're just really interested in that last one, climate migration and population change. You click on that and it brings up a lot of the issues, and it links down to how those vulnerabilities may affect the following sectors, and it gets into those grids, and there's a lot to it. So please check out those. And then again, why we're here today is these 29 goals and 67 strategies organized within these different sectors. You can, depending, maybe you're a farmer and you really want to know what happens in where the goals and strategies are for agriculture, you click on there and it brings that up. And there's goals followed by strategies. When we first started this, they were all mixed together, and it's very important to think, what are we trying, the vision we're trying to see in the world, those are the goals, and then the strategies is how we get there. If you click on the main goals and strategies page, like Caroline just did, you'll see that this is a very interactive page, and we encourage you to go to this page because it shows how interconnected everything is. These are all the risks and how they may what risks are associated with each of those sectors. So if you click on human health, these are some of the risks that are associated in the goals, and then you can see how they might overlap with business, who also needs to think about health, how they overlap with tourism, who also needs to consider health. And we built it this way to encourage us to think in a non-siloed way. We all do our work sometimes like this, but this is an opportunity for us to make sure that we're working together, we're communicating, we're working collaboratively as we see some of that, those cross links that are obvious here, but going to be very crucial as we move forward and implement this plan. Okay, so we can jump over to feedback. This is a draft plan. We are asking for feedback and hoping to receive some, mostly everything from, yeah, this is awesome, this is great, to maybe some specifics. What did we get wrong? In particular, what strategies are missing that you really think need to be brought forward to build a resilient Missoula County? So there's a link right there that takes you to a survey form. And then also, that form will be open to February 3rd. And we also have some other opportunities to give input. So there's a feedback page right on our website. And then let's click over to next steps. Here we just have a basic couple next steps. I'm going to talk a bit more about those in a second, but there's also a form to get involved. If you want to just stay informed, if you want to potentially work towards on some committee, implementation task force, let us know. That form is available there. Okay, and so now let's bump over to next steps. I think we can pop out of the website, so do check it out. Let us know how it works. ClimateReadyMissoula.org is that new website. And again, it's a website put together by the city, the county, and Climate Smart Missoula. On your tables, you should all have at least a couple of these little handouts, these flyers that let you know when our public open houses are. We have 3 of them coming up, 2 on January 22nd, midday, late afternoon, and then again on January 24th, midday. So check those out on your tables. This is also on the website. We are, at this point in the plan, we are looking for that input. We're also going around to community councils across all of Missoula County and trying to hit meetings and share what we've come up with in this draft plan with a lot of folks. Again, it's both information and to gather some of that input. Oh, that's back to me. Next steps. Okay, so where do we go from here? In the short story here is that we're going to take that input, we're going to finalize the plan, hopefully in about a month, and then it works through the various local government stages to be formally adopted as a plan through city council and then county commissioners, ideally adopted as an amendment to the growth policies. So we are moving these through formal channels. And then also, as we get it finalized, we hope that it's integrated into all of the work that you do, whether it's business, whether it's a nonprofit you run, whether it's various places within the university, local government, and things. But we hope to have that. That will be finalized in the spring. And then we'll need to get busy and get to work. This isn't a plan that's designed to be shelf art and just sit on a shelf. It's also not a plan just to be solely operated and run through local government. It really is a plan that we all need to work on. This is sort of all of us in that. But we do envision an implementation task force and ideally some committees that will be formed based on some of those sectors so they can do work within their own channel, their own lane, and then cross-pollinate and work together in a collaborative fashion. So both of those will come forward. We envision a report every year on this plan. We envision it needing to be updated about every 5 years. All of those things are sort of looking into the future. And so before we get to that, just a couple more points. You may be sitting here, and even though there's those science projections, why would we do this in Missoula? Why wouldn't we just wait for somebody else to come help us? And I think there's a couple of reasons. The reason we do this is because we'll be a healthier community. We'll be a more connected community that has stronger social cohesion, that is really oriented around some social equity considerations. It will save us money. There's oodles of evidence out there from the research that planning, preparing for climate perturbations saves local government and businesses and people money along the way. So we also do it because we in Missoula tend to like to lead. I happen to be a member of the Governor's Climate Solutions Council. We're right now in the process of developing a climate plan for all of Montana. And it's interesting how much the rest of the state looks to us because we are out in front. We are the first city and county to do a plan that's robust to this extent. I will say the other groups that are doing it are the tribes. The CSKT, the Blackfeet tribes all have really robust plans that we can learn from. But together we are leading and people are looking to us. We know that wildfire smoke, some of our watershed issues, they don't stop at the boundary of Missoula County. So we will need to work more regionally across our state and across, even beyond, across our whole country to really become a more forward-thinking, adapted, and resilient Missoula. It will take all of us in that respect. So it is really nice to be able to lead and be able to bring that forward and to be able to connect with other communities and tribes along the way. And then the last point I think I'd like to make is just revisit what Diana said at the beginning. We can't adapt our way out of climate change. And we here, and I think most of the folks know that in this room. The adaptation strategies are very important. We do need to build a stronger future, more resilient future, but we also need to address the root cause of climate change, which is reducing our emissions and shrinking that carbon footprint. And that way we'll be climate ready. So again, it's balancing that mitigation and that adaptation. And so the last thing I'd like to mention to that is it doesn't end here today. We're going to begin, we're going to put this plan out. Hopefully I'll check it out. But we also have a really exciting event coming up put on by Climate Smart Missoula, the city, the county, the university, Clearwater Credit Union, and a few others. We're hosting what's called the Big Climate Change Event, February 19th. At the Wilma. We want to pack the Wilma. We have a really engaging, exciting visiting scholar and presenter, Rob Davies, coming. We look to this to be a very inspiring event, a very event where we can really build that momentum and build it together. So we hope that all of you put this on your calendar and also come on February 19th and join all of us as we build a more resilient and climate smart area. We also really want to do it together and these kinds of events here today at City Club, and something, hopefully this event on February 19th will bring us together so we can build that future. And I just want to say at the very end here, I know we'll come back with table talk, but do want to thank Eric and Susan and the folks at City Club for allowing this presentation, allowing us to kick off 2020. We believe 2020 is going to be a really big year for climate action and a lot of other good work in our community. So thank you for having us.
Thank you all. That was great, very interesting. Okay, table talk. Here are your instructions. And we have a lot of tables, so chances are we are not going to get to every single table. We'll do our best. And that's where you come in by asking one question, one succinct question. So we're going to break for about 10 minutes. Please, if you haven't already introduced yourself to your table mates, please do so. And take 10 minutes to formulate a question. Again, just one. On topic, no long preamble, just the question. And I've seen some public shaming when that rule is not followed, so just heads up if you're new here. And it's to be your table's question. So when you stand up, you should say, our question is not my question. So, all right, everybody clear? Yes. All right, we'll go and formulate, and we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. We have two folks with roving microphones, Eric and Dave. So if your table is ready, okay, everybody stop talking. If your table is ready to ask the question, please raise your hands and one of our microphone people will be with you. All right, ready? Everybody be quiet. Okay, I saw Karen's hand first, so, all right there? Okay, and then that table, okay. So remember, succinct, one question, reflecting your table.
Hi, first of all, thank you for presenting this. This is great to see. Our question from our table was, we love the resiliency plan. What is the performance metrics? What are we aiming for? What does success look like from a metric standpoint?
That was not one of the allowed questions. We had them scripted. No, there's more detail in the plan, and especially in some of the work we've done about what success would look like. But to be honest, we needed to get this out to the community, and then we will need all of us to help determine that. So a few of those things you might say we punted, but we believe that the implementation task force yet to be identified, and some of the work we do needs to plug in those details. So there are more details, and especially metrics and what success look like. And part of it is just started to blow up into a huge thing when you start thinking for everyone. So, how many HEPA air filters do we need? Does every school need one in every classroom? Is that a metric? Possibly yes, but we didn't quite get to that level of detail.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Amy. I would say just due to the diversity of the strategies, I think it's going to be a really strategy-specific metric, and so that's something that we'll need to develop as we launch into the implementation phase.
I gotta go over here. All right, you're up.
Great.
Hi, our table is really interested in thinking about the housing situation and the transition to more sustainable, energy efficient buildings and how the building codes will change, or what that process is looking like at this point and what the pressure points are. Thank you.
That's a really good question. Thank you, Jenny. So we know a lot of the sort of the co-benefit strategies that come out of this plan, the ones that both deal with adaptation and mitigation, are around the built environment. Right now, we are in the process, I know there's some of our friends from local architect friends here, of working to potentially bring a green building summit together where we can get everyone that works on housing and the built environment, because it's not just houses, it's also, commercial spaces, together and try to figure out how we drive more energy efficient building within new buildings and also within retrofits. It's not just code. So I don't know if folks know, we can't just write a stronger building code. We're restricted by state law about how those codes, but we can adopt and encourage some stretch codes so we can give incentives potentially. That's stuff that Chase has been researching and working on. But before we actually say what those are, we want to bring a lot of folks together, builders, developers, realtors, planners, and figure out where there's tension and how we can step beyond it. It's a tension that every community sees where they're trying to have more housing and they're trying to build for the future. But we think we've got a lot of smart people and we just need to figure out where those push points are more deliberately and enact on it. So we're thinking we'd like to host a big event and a summit in potentially as soon as March on that topic. And so stay tuned. And if that's something that interests you and you are in any one of those categories related to housing and the built environment, see us and we'll put you on the list and help plan it. Chase, would you like to follow up on that?
So our question is kind of similar to the housing one. You guys use that example of how the climate would impact a family. So are you guys working, is Climate Ready working with entities like City Council when it comes to approving projects? For example, that condo project up in the South Hills and how that impacts, from a flooding standpoint, the people at the bottom of the hill. So just wondering what the process is there.
I think I'll stay away from commenting on the 4th Street project for now, for lots of reasons, including I haven't been intimately involved. But, as mentioned, we do plan on having this adopted as an amendment to the city growth policy, which acts as an overall lens to how we grow. And so, that's a big lens. And then also, I think with that adoption, again, we just start asking those questions, and so that's a big reason I think to have it be an amendment to the growth policy for both the city and the county.
I guess I would just add to that. Thank you, Chase, and from my perspective, also, I think once. In terms of the process, once it is an amendment to the growth policy, that means we're required to take a look at what does this mean in terms of zoning, what does this mean in terms of subdivision regulations. I'm looking at my planner friends over here, and figure that out, how this trickles down to specific development projects.
Don't look at me, you have to look at them. They're the deciders.
Thank you. Great presentation. Our succinct question is 29 goals, 67 strategies, 8 sectors, Diana working in the county, Chase working in the city, Amy straddling multiple worlds, moving vans pointed our way. How do we implement this thing? I mean, my gosh, this is a huge, ambitious, and one of the most important tests of our times. Go, Amy. No punting.
So the number one next steps recommendation in this plan is that we need capacity to do this. And the three of us all have pulled this together, Caroline and our steering committee, out of the jobs that we already do or the work that we already do. So to really move this forward, we will need some capacity and support, we believe. There may be other options out there. I do think moving forward, Missoula will be needing to look for support, whether it's from the state government, the federal government, philanthropic opportunities to help build that capacity. But we do need extra support to make it happen. And then, I think that you can correct us if I'm wrong, but when you look through the plan and you go and spend some time with that website, we hope that there is a place for everyone. I mean, climate is so big and it's such a big lens that you should be able to find yourself in there, whether it's your work or your personal interests, and then figure out how you can maybe even have to add something to your plate. I mean, at this point, that's what we need to do. It needs all of us. It needs people that also aren't in those rooms, and people here hopefully can know those people. I find sometimes you find people, I'm looking to, I'm semi-retired, don't have much going on. Oh, really? Maybe that's the opportunity to build them in again, not to just that implementation task force, but also those committees. So organizing that and organizing those committees is going to take capacity, but getting things done is the next level where all of us can step in. And I'll provide one kind of simple example. I realize we will need that big layer. But we had somebody step in our room or walk into our office a couple weeks ago that knew this plan was coming and said, okay, I've got an idea. I don't know, George, are you here? Yeah, there he is, right there. And he's out in target range. He said, you know what, we need more shade. Me and my neighbors want to plant some more trees. We kind of know where they need to go. And we're even willing to take care and water them. And that's what we need. We need people to say, we can do this in our neighborhood, in our community. And yeah, maybe they want to work with Parks and Rec and the Urban Forestry Division to make sure they're planting the right trees and they're actually watering them at the right time and things like that. But it was like, I'm going to step up, or my neighbors. Did you tell all your neighbors that they're now part of this? They might not know yet, but George and his neighbors are going to do that. And I think that's how we have to look at it. You have an elderly neighbor, maybe her house isn't all that tight. Can you help her get some better windows? Can you buy a HEPA air filter and just give it to that elderly neighbor? It's going to take all of us. And Chase, did you have a follow-up for that?
I'll just add to that, and similarly, I read an article this weekend. It was posted on social media by an elected official, actually, and it was from the New York Times, and I think it was titled something like "How to Stay Calm in the Climate Crisis," which certainly resonated with me. Susan mentioned I've been losing sleep for a while over this. But there were some really good tenets that I think are good takeaways, especially on how to implement. One is to ditch the shame. I think we all kind of get in those cycles and acknowledge the truth, but ditch the shame. And with this plan, we hope that the information contained in it and some direction provided by it is clarifying. And I think that clarification can be really empowering to ditch the shame and to work on implementation. A couple of other points from that article that I think are related to this are not just understand what you're fighting against, and we want to acknowledge that science, and that's certainly in the plan, but know what you're fighting for as well. One of the first community conversations we started with what are the values that we love about Missoula, and what are we fighting for? And so I think that's important in finding your own direction, because it is going to take us all to understand what your value is and what that one thing is that lights you up to work on, and identify that and then go for it. And then also, and out of that is just to define your role, and we're going to have lots of opportunities in this implementation phase for you to engage. And so join that effective group that's working on the solution that lights you up, and if we all do that, then we'll have a better shot at figuring this out and implementing in a real way.
Hi. So we can all agree that we're living in a sixth mass extinction currently right now. How important do you feel as city officials, city leaders, to use the most accurate language in your reports, in how you address the public, using the correct language, which would be climate collapse, climate crisis, climate emergency, planetary emergency? How can we expect as a city to start addressing and acting to that emergency when we don't use the correct language and the most accurate? As well as, how do you as city officials, city leaders, when the members of the community come to you with thoughts, suggestions, how do you classify it as either being rational and or radical, and do you feel you have the right to classify either or as such?
I really appreciate the question, and I guess my first thought is I want to address the rational versus radical, and I think Chase mentioned those terms, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think I know what he meant, because this came from Rob Davies, Professor Davies, who's going to be at the big climate event, and his point was taking action now to address this emergency is not radical, it is rational. Things that otherwise in the past have been considered radical are not radical. When your house is burning down, taking immediate action to put that fire out is not radical. And I think that's where that distinction came from. And so we're not trying to say, no, that's too radical. We're saying what maybe in the past has been defined as radical is exactly what is logical, rational, and what we need to be doing at this moment.
That's exactly what I meant by that. That's exactly what I meant by that statement, and thank you for articulating that so well. And so words are very important, and we're doing our best to use the right words, and I think we agree a bunch in this room.
It's a shift we need to make. I actually, if you check my notes, I was going to end with climate crisis, and I kind of just didn't because it's habit. And so I appreciate you helping us to step away from that. We're up here being a little bit light and a bit hopeful and trying to help everybody be a little bit courageous. But believe me, at 3 a.m, we are not feeling that way either. This is the biggest crisis that we face as humanity ever, and we have to be up to that challenge. And so I appreciate the language correction. It is a climate crisis. And yet it's a crisis for which we have no opportunity, no other choice but to act and to do it together and to do it with grace and to do it with an open heart. And that's the place that the three of us come from every day.
So we appreciate all the buy-in that you kind of talked about and are trying to inspire through this plan, but we're wondering what are the enforceables here at the individual level because this is a crisis? Like what are the painful pills we'll just have to swallow as individuals in this city if we're going to make a difference, whether that's absolutely no more lawns or an enforceable emission standard for our vehicles and such.
I think as you look in the plan, some of the strategies that have come forward are ultimately, once they're adopted, I mean, again, this is just a plan, and it's just the draft, so we don't have that yet, but will be potentially enforceable. And I think of some of the ways, probably the most obvious would be some zoning, because that is very enforceable. You know, we may need to figure out where our buildings are in flood zones and when high-risk areas of the ways I mentioned, those are enforceable measures that we will need to take. There's other we know that in Missoula we're somewhat hamstrung because we can't have stronger building codes. There are things that we can't do, but there are development, there's issues within development that we can do more. And I guess I would hope that it's very iterative, that we can propose some things, and those those parts of our community that know that it's not ideal in the short term are going to get up and say, in the short term, this might hurt my bottom line, I'm going to do it anyway. Or we have also some ideas about how those of us that have more means and funds, whether you're a bank or whether you're a business doing really well or an individual, can pool some of those funds and allow us to do some things with, potential for gap funding, potential for taking that money and bringing it to the Human Resource Council or some group that needs to do it to weatherize. So I think the enforcement thing is in there. That's going to be up to City Council and the Board of County Commissioners to say, yes, I agree to that. But then other things are going to have all of us, going to stretch all of us. There's probably more in enforcement.
Thank you for the opportunity. We would like to know, what is the reason why education is not a sector?
I think if you take a look at the draft plan and at the website, you'll see that education appears in every sector probably, and things that we should be doing to help educate and inform. I guess I'm hesitating. That was my immediate answer, but then I'm thinking maybe you're talking about sort of higher education, the university specifically. I may have misunderstood the question, but yeah, I think we see that we interpreted education as really being a part of all the sectors in the plan, and you'll see that in the draft strategies.
It's also a draft, and if that's missing and needs to be more clearly highlighted, this is the time.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Our table has a burning question. Given Missoula's leadership in climate change resiliency, how can we leverage or hold companies accountable for their impacts to climate change? For example, Northwestern Energy.
We do know Northwestern Energy is a sponsor of this event, right? So it will be nice. The three of us here in local government, I mean, there are things that we can do, and I'll pass this down. And we are trying. We passed a 100% clean electricity resolution, and right now the county and the city are working with Northwestern on a memorandum of understanding and ways that we can move that forward. I think there are ways that we can continue to do that, and we have our elected officials here today that have spoken out at Public Service Commission hearings, have spoken out and provided feedback to Northwestern Energy and to other folks that deliver or provide our energy. So I think there are elected officials, because we have had great support, impressive leadership from our City Council and our Board of County Commissioners at this point. I can't say that strongly enough. I know a lot of them in the room, and they really are looking for those ways. There are limits to what local government legally can do for some of those ways, and the only way we're going to make progress on that is because we're out leading, and now other cities and communities are joining in with us. And that has been a dramatic change in the last 6 months. We're getting calls from Great Falls. Helena's moving forward. Other communities in our city are doing that. So it's that strength of working together that's going to bring that change that we need, but it needs changes at the state legislature and changes at our Public Service Commission, because they make the rules and regulations that then our utilities and other power providers have to follow by law. So it is who represents us that matters in that case.
Yeah, I would just add, all of the formal plans and resolutions, like the 100% clean electricity resolution that Amy alluded to, they're very public, and they hold both local governments and Northwestern Energy accountable as a partner and provider for our energy, and that's just one example. And so there's built-in accountability there, and it's all rooted in trust. And behind each one of those goals and each one of these agreements, we sit down with Northwestern Energy. We're identifying where we agree, what we can work on together, and what we can't. And we don't start at no anymore. We start at what are the barriers and how we can get around those. And if we continue to build that trust, make all of those goals public, and then provide opportunities for more and more cities and others in Montana to join, then that demand grows and it becomes impossible to ignore. And so that's the greater vision of all of this. And I think that that's how we all can work together to achieve these goals and to make some real difference in Montana.
One last question. Hello. So we had a couple different questions and concerns. I'll just name the one concern, not a question. This concern was about thinking about the electrical grid and what happens if the grid goes down. But the question I'm going to highlight is, in these different scenarios of what could happen that we're using as a basis to discuss what kind of impacts we can expect in Missoula, does the worst case scenario account for hitting certain climate tipping points worldwide and kind of non-linear warming? And I guess how are you thinking about that in assessing the different impacts that we could be facing in Missoula?
Yeah, so in 30 minutes, we didn't get too detailed into the climate projections and how we formulated those. One thing I don't think know that it was clear, but a lot of the work in our climate primer and how we're thinking of this is kind of leading us towards mid-century. So even though we put forward a couple of projections for end of century, we're talking about just the next few decades ahead of us. And then the more specifics around climate and tipping points, we'd have to actually ask that question of our science advisor, Nick Silverman. Do you want to tackle that now? In a quick minute or two? He's good in quick minutes.
I thought I was going to get out of here. Last question. All of the scenarios are based on climate models, global climate models. Those all account for those feedbacks that you're talking about. So in a sense, yes, those scenarios do account for these tipping points. Of course, those tipping points are unknown in a lot of ways. So we're still learning about those. So to the best of our knowledge, yes, they're in there.
Yeah, right, let's clap. So we do always try to end promptly at 1. Perhaps you could stay behind not only to take questions from the media, but for those of you who don't have to leave. But thank you all very much for a really great presentation. Thank all of you for being here. Thanks to our sponsors. Remember, until March 9, just $35, discounted membership if you join or rejoin. Please consider sponsoring so that others can attend. And we look forward to seeing you on February 17 for the Riverfront Triangle Development Forum. Have a great rest of your day.